In the name of the National Latino Behavioral Health Association and the National Hispanic and Latino Prevention Technology Transfer Center, we welcome you. June is National Men's Health Month. This month is all about encouraging the men in our life to take care of their health, and our center is happy to partner with the National Compadres Network to bring you a 3-part learning series titled El Hombre Noble, how to engage, embrace, and heal Chicano Latino males. Today is the third and last session, Sacred Fatherhood. My name is Dolca Zelaya. I'm the project coordinator for the National Hispanic and Latino Prevention Technology Transfer Center. I will be your host for today's session. Now, please allow us to share some brief instructions about today's BLS. A copy of today's presentation will be also made available after the event. The lines will be muted throughout the presentation to minimize background noise. When we get to the Q&A portion of our session, you will have an opportunity to ask questions by clicking the Q&A box, and I will present your question to our moderator and panelists. We will also be asking you to fill out a brief survey at the end of this event. This satisfaction evaluation is important to the work we do and provide us with the opportunity to improve our training efforts. Although we are not securing continuing education credit for this event, we plan to do for future events. A certificate of completion will be sent to you after this event. So let's begin. Next slide. Let's start by introducing the National Latino Behavioral Health Association, NALBA. NALBA is a nonprofit organization. It's located in New Mexico. The mission and goal of the National Latino Behavioral Health Association is to influence the national behavioral health policy, eliminate disparities in fundings and access to services, and improve the quality of services and treatment outcomes for Latino populations. Next slide, please. NALBA was established to fill a need for a unified national voice for Latino populations in the behavioral health arena, and to bring attention to the great disparities that exist in the areas of access, utilization, practice-based research, and adequately trained personnel. NALBA's executive director is Mr. Fred Sandoval. NALBA's objective is to provide national leadership on mental health and substance abuse concerns of the Latino in 5 major areas of focus: targeted capacity expansion for mental health services, Latino behavioral health evidence-based practices, legislation to increase the number of counselors and health practitioners, funding for co-occurring disorders on alcohol and substance abuse, opioid crisis in the Latino community, and suicide prevention. Now allow me to introduce you to our Prevention Technology Transfer Center. Our PTTC is part of the TTC network, a multidisciplinary resource for professionals in the prevention field, established in 2018 by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, SAMHSA. The PTTC network is comprised of 10 domestic regional centers, 6 international HIV centers funded by PEPFAR, 2 national focus areas, and a network coordinating office. Together, the network serves the 50 US states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the US Virgin Islands, and the Pacific Islands of Guam, America Samoa, Palau, the Marshall Islands, the Micronesia, and the Mariana Islands. The International HIV, ATTC, and PTTC serve Vietnam, Southeast Asia, South Africa, and Ukraine. We are using the map of the US-based PTTC. Our centers has a national focus for Hispanic and Latino communities and the workforce, that provides services to these communities. Our PTTC is staffed by Dr. Luigi Mancini, Ms. Priscilla Yamasi as the Executive Administrative Assistant, and myself, Dolga Michelle Salai. Now it's time to introduce our moderator, Mr. Jerry Tello, and our panelists, Mr. Jaime Molina and Mr. Mario Osuna Sanchez. Mr. Tello, over the past 40 years, has dedicated himself to the prevention and healing of individuals, families, communities, and systems by speaking to over 500,000 of people and training thousands of facilitators across the nation. Born from a family of Mexican, Texan, and Coahuiltecan roots and raised in the South Central Compton's area of Los Angeles. Mr. Tello is an international expert in the area of trauma healings, men and boys of color, fatherhood, family strengthening, racial justice and healing, community peace and mobilization, and cultural-based violence prevention programs. He's a co-founder of the National Compadres Network that was established in 1988, and presently is the director of the training and capacity building. He has authored numerous articles, videos, and curricula addressing the issues of fatherhood, males' right of passage, relationship, and against violence prevention violence, and pregnancy prevention. So, Mr. Jerry Tello, welcome one more time. Thank you so much for helping us through this series. Now, let me introduce Mr. Jaime Molina. He's a senior trainer at National Compadres Network. Graduated from Cabrillo College, have a bachelor degree in psychology and sociology. He received his master's degree from San Jose State, California in clinical social work. He has worked for over 30 years in nonprofit agencies, county and state and national efforts in the areas of family dynamics, youth leadership development, mental health, substance abuse, gun involvement, family strengthening, juvenile justice reform, supporting father involvement study, and cultural competence. He is well known and respected in the school system and recovery community. Currently, he is the master trainer with the National Compadres Network around the country in the areas of family strengthening and transformational healing practice. Mr. Jaime Molina, welcome. Thank you so much for supporting us today too. And last but not least, we have Mr. Mario Osuna Sanchez. He born and raised in East Los Angeles. Mario Osuna Sanchez grew up in a family impacted by alcoholism, domestic violence, gangs, and drug addict family members. As a result of decisions he made during his adolescence, Mario became a father at the age of 15. With this many obstacles set before him, and with the help of his Mario was able to accomplish his goal of finishing high school and going to college. Mario Osuna Sanchez has over 25 years of experience developing and implementing healing-informed services, cultural rites of passages, teen pregnancy prevention, gun intervention, and community violence prevention in Santa Clara County, specializing in the East San Jose. He's nationally recognized for his skill and developing and delivering cultural relevant services to reach and welcome the most marginalized young and adult men in our community. Mr. Jello and team, welcome. Let's start this conversation.
Thank you, Dolca, and muchas gracias a todos. Buenos días, buenas tardes, wherever you're at. We want to just say, Tlaxocamatli, thank you and welcome. You know, and those that have been with us for the 3 parts of the series. Well, thank you for continuing, and those for the first time, we want to welcome you. And I'm really honored today to have 2 really compadres, close friends, colleagues, relatives that have been on this journey for a long time. They not only do this work in a very wonderfully competent way, but they are wonderful men and great fathers as well. And it's one of the things that we believe in our mantra at the National Compadres Network. It's not enough about knowing the teachings, but it's about living the teachings. And so, we're going to have a dialogue today, and we could probably talk many hours with the experience that Jaime and Mario have, but we're going to try and focus the time and leave some time at the end for questions. But I want to begin, just by thanking Creator and thanking the ancestors and thanking you and acknowledging all of you and who you're connected to, your people and where you're located, your communities. That's really, really important. And one of the traditional values that we live by is that sense of acknowledgement, that the first step really is acknowledgement. So let's go to the slides, and I'm going to review for those that have been with the last two presentations. We're going to review. For those that haven't, I want to form a basis here. And the philosophy that we function on is philosophy de la cultura cura, which says culture heals. But what it really means, and you can read it here, what it really means is that we believe that everyone carries an essence of values, of traditions, of spirit, of knowledge, of wisdom that is within us individually, but within us connected to our families and connected to our generational wisdom. We believe that we have that as a people. Obviously, some of us know it more and some of us live it more, but that's our beginning part, that when we work with men and work with fathers, we work with anyone, we come with that belief that ya sabes, ya tienes, you already have that sense of essence or sacredness in you, and from our experience over the years, we do not know a man that does not want to be a good partner, father, brother, husband, in a good way. So we come with that belief. Let's go to the next slide. We also rely on these as ancestral teachings. And if we had more time, we'd talk about that concept of la educación, being bien educado. A lot of our parents would say, our parents, we want kids bien educado. And it does mean formally educated, but what it really means is know how to carry yourself, how to be in the world, how to interact, and what's your role. And there are four basic teachings that over the years we have found are significant. We find this in our codis and our old writings, but even in sitting with grandmas and grandpas, and what are the essential things within. And we found that there's four essential elements. And the first is the sense of bendición, right? The blessing that everyone is wanted and welcome and has a sense of dignity. And we find that that's really important in working with men and fathers. And many times we're not felt that we're wanted or felt needed or any of those things. So if you want to talk about engagement, which we will later, this is a real critical one. The second one is sacred purpose. And we talk about fatherhood. What is the purpose of men and fathers? What is our purpose in the family? What is our purpose with children? What is our purpose, and what does that mean, sacred purpose? That our role is sacred and essential. And we know that when fathers are not around, there's something's missing, right? The third thing is that there's culturally-based teachings, values, and community teachers. And we know that it's essential when you're working with communities, from different cultures, but specifically from Latino culture, and even within our culture, we have, Dominicanos, Hondureños, people from El Salvador, from Mexico, from all over, and then you have, Chicanos that live in or raised here. And so the cultural values can be a little different, but nevertheless, they're really important because they help form family bonds. We're going to talk about healing those things too, because we also recognize that within the historical concept of generational trauma, some of those values and traditions have been compromised and have been colonized. And so therefore, we need safe, compassionate people and secure places for people to learn, to heal, to grow. And when it comes to fathers and men, the question is, where do they go, right? Let's go to the next slide. We rely on these concepts del hombre noble. And if you haven't seen these are ancient concepts, but a lot of people don't recognize that there are concepts and to describe el hombre noble, a noble man. In order for a person to be a good father, they must first be a good man. And many young children, young boys especially, are wondering, what does it mean to be a man? And unfortunately, there's a false narrative in this society about what it means to be a man. And some of it is, the the patriarchy and the misogyny and all the negative things that have come into, to the world that way. Many times we feel that that's part of it, and part of our role in working with fathers is to reground them in these principles that really are the basis. Let's go to the next slide. Of this concept that's very, we struggle with it, the concept of the ser macho. And stereotypically, there's a very negative view of what el macho means. We think it means somebody that is a peleonero, borracho, a womanizer, all of that. And those are all the stereotypical things that are said about, especially Chicano Latino males. And not that some of us don't struggle with those, but when we exhibit those are wounded elements. Those are the wounds that are coming out. Those are the colonized things that are coming out. And so we really want to ground men in what it takes to really be a true hombre noble. And so here are these 12 principles right here. Let's go to the next slide. The thing that we struggle with also, without even knowing it, then is that there's historical trauma, generational trauma, that we have to understand what our people have gone through and continue to go through. Even today, the racism, the oppression, the struggle, especially for familias, especially for men. We work with a lot of unaccompanied minors, meaning young boys at 13, 14, 15 that have no dad, no family here, and their family becomes the streets. And then they become a father, and then they raise children. So the trauma that they're carrying, sometimes if we don't heal it, then is transferred to the next generation. So next slide. We want to stop here. Let's go to full screen, and I'm gonna now pass the palabra to our panelists here that really are experts in the field, and we're gonna begin with Mr. Molina, who has been on this path for a long time. I wonder, Jaime, if you could begin by just sharing a little about who you are and how you came on this path to see fatherhood as an essential part of your life and your work.
Muchas gracias, and hello everyone. It's an honor to be here. I was just reflecting on what's been said and kind of the topic, but I was kind of reminded that I have a story. Like all of us have a story, and even that a lot of men don't get to tell their story, and sometimes they don't get to live their story. And for me, my story, and I'm not gonna get into that. We could spend all day here, but the idea that I had different points in my life where I struggled being a man, being a father, and also being a young boy without a father. And I want to just kind of clarify that I don't use that as a crutch to say, well, I ended up this way because the father wasn't there. But I learned so many things from my dad, and I grew up with a sense of insecurity because my father wasn't there for his own, their reasons. And so I had to learn what it was to not have a good relationship with my dad, and the safety that I had to, we know in kind of practices, teachings, and living this teaching, is that the whole sense of safety and security is key. And so I had to find it some way because I needed it. And so I find the safety in a lot of my friends. And growing up, actually, I find today myself, half an hour from where I grew up, in the barrios in Juarez, Chihuahua. And so my experience was my friends. From a very young age, I'm thinking like 7, I was acting like I was 18. At 8 years old, I was doing things that, because that was my school. And so growing up that way gave me a perspective. And throughout my life, I've been looking all around me. I'm very observant that I see what men are doing and how they struggle. And I didn't realize that it was all preparing me, because then when I realized that, I became a terrible dad because I didn't know how to be a good man. And I learned a lot from my mom, but I still needed to have somebody to follow. And it wasn't until later in my life that, and then during my struggle, that I realized, wow, this is everything I lost. And as it relates to the question of how did I get on this path? Well, I realized I really wanted to be a father. And more than being a father, I want to be a dad. And so I I learned to be a dad because of my own experiences. And at some point in my life, I made a commitment. I'm going to be a good dad. Not just a father, I'm going to be a good dad. And I'm going to make a commitment to be a good father to my children and to pay it forward, because I realized many people felt like me. And so if you ask me, do I know what some men are going through? Yes, because I was one of them. And so that's been kind of part of my passion and my journey. And, life gave me the opportunity to pay it forward. And I'm just fortunate to be able to do that. Thank you, Maestro.
Yeah, thank you, Jaime. And what a lot of people don't know, and we have these conversations openly all the time, is that, people wonder, can men recover from struggle? Can they recover from issues of violence or substance abuse or even being incarcerated? And, you didn't say it directly, Jaime, but what you see right here is that reflection of that sacredness that he has recovered the sacredness, because at one time you were in the midst of all of that.
Yeah, and if I may, because I have my professional colleagues, I say, what I realized I needed to do a participant observation of the prison system. And I wanted to know about firsthand, so I dedicated 18 years study to the abuse of drugs and alcohol in my life. And in that madness, I realized how precious my family was to me, and being in those spaces and realizing that if ever I get opportunity to kind of undo or to make amends, it's kind of what created a drive in myself. And I am very fortunate because the odds of me recovering my family are very low, and I happen to be a very present father and grandfather to 4 beautiful daughters and 5 beautiful grandkids. Gracias, maestro.
Thank you. Well, with that in mind, let's pass the palabra to Mario, because his journey, he has a journey and a story, and it's part of his medicine, part of the teachings. And I feel so honored to call him my nephew. I call him my nephew, and we've kind of grown up together, learning and trying to teach, and share these teachings. So Mario, if you could kind of introduce yourself and share a little bit about you and your journey.
Yeah, buenos días, buenas tardes. I'm Mario Zuna Sanchez para servirles. It is an honor to be here with everyone. Thankful to be able to share space and offer a little bit of what it is that we do and why it's important that we lift up the need to connect fathers to their families, to their own sacredness. So just to offer a little insight, I'm the son of Margarita and Gabino Osuna. My parents were born and raised on the border of Mexico, and 2 of my brothers were also born and raised, and the rest of us, 3 of us, were born in Los Angeles. So I'm first generation, consider myself an indigenous Chicano. And having been raised the youngest of 4 boys, for us, unfortunately, in our homes in Los Angeles, in East Los Angeles, our home never really felt safe because the man of the house, my father, unfortunately was a person that really lived through his traumas. My first memory of my dad is visiting him while he was in prison, locked up for his alcohol abuse. When he would be home, he would unfortunately act out his traumas on us. So many times it would result in us going and feeling more comfortable being on the streets than being home. And being the youngest, I tagged along with my brothers a lot. At that time, late 80s, early 90s in Los Angeles, in East Los Angeles, where there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of drug abuse. There was a lot of gang violence. So for us, it was really a sense of trying to survive, trying to understand what it meant to grow up in a community where, in many ways, being first generation, like people say, we didn't feel like we belonged to this country. And then when we would go back to Mexico, we didn't feel like we belonged there either. So there was this constant sense of searching for identity, searching for belonging. And many times the streets is what provided us something more than we were getting anywhere else. I became a dad at the age, as it was noted earlier, at the age of 15. And I was 14 years old when I found out I was going to be a father. And for me, actually going through that experience, which it's not a recommended intervention I put out there, but it was my intervention. And I have to be sincere in that. You know, my son was born. I always tell him, and now he likes to use it against me a little bit, or for his benefit. My son was born on on Easter Sunday. And I always tell him he was my resurrection, because at that point, before I had him, really the trajectory of many of us where we were growing up and how we were living, the trajectory was that of you were either going to end up in prison for life, you were going to end up dead, or you were going to end up in a wheelchair. And being a kid, I kind of understood that, and I kind of was resigned to that. But when my son was born, and when I was blessed to be there to witness him come into the world and take his first breath, I really did feel something change inside of me that gave me a different purpose, that actually offered me a purpose and offered me a direction in life that made me want to give him everything I know my dad, now I understand my dad could never give me. And that I wanted to be able to be there for him and really do the best I could by my son. So I put that out there because this last Sunday that we celebrated Father's Day, it's my 28th year of fatherhood. So I've been a dad longer than, the only other thing I've been longer than a dad is a brother and a son. I've been a dad most of my life. I'm blessed. I'm married now for 18 years to my wife, Blasa, and I have 2 more children. My daughter, Ileana Esperanza, who's 18 years old, just graduated from high school. And my younger son, my baby, A.B. Osuna, who identifies as a transgender, transmasculine boy or young man. And that's a journey in itself that we're experiencing as we support our child. And I'm a grandfather to to the CEO, executive director of our home, like we like to say, Juliana Marie, who is 7 years old. And that whole experience, all these realities have really helped define not only who I am as a person, but really how I choose to do work in the community to support other men, to support young men, to support this need to be conscious that if we want healthy women and children, we need healthy men in our communities. And I've been doing community work since I was 16 years old. Like Maestro likes to say, I was one of those kids that once I graduated and was successful in my work, I were successful in my program, they couldn't get rid of me. So they had to start paying me. And I've been doing that my whole life now. First in East LA, then over here in East San Jose, or the east side of San Jose. And I have many years of doing intervention work, working with fathers coming out of the prison system, working with young men, doing gang intervention work, creating cultural rites of passage. And it's really not our jobs, it's our way of life. And I was very blessed, quickly just to close up, that when I met Maestro Jerry Teo, I was about 19, just turning 20, that I was invited to go to the Joven Noble curriculum training. And I always like to say this because this is how important, and this is what really is the ability of creating change for people when they come to your services. I came thinking I was going to get trained on something to offer to others. And what he did is he opened up a journey that really connected me, that if I wanted to be a good father, which I always was trying my best to do, I had to really understood what it meant to be a man. And he welcomed us into manhood. He welcomed us into getting connected to our culture, to getting connected to our ancestors, understanding that there was a way of living in harmony and in balance, and that through that we could find our peace, to really be present, to really be connected, and give our children the best we could by ensuring that we no longer were going to transfer our traumas to them, but we were going to transform them into medicine and teachings to ensure that they no longer had to carry that which in many ways held us back. So I'm thankful to be here with you all.
Thank you, Mario. You know, as you speak and as Jaime speaks, it just brings back so many memories because, you know, we been on this journey not only as men, but as fathers and grandfathers now for all of us. but it, you know, it's been challenged. It challenged as well. You know, it's been challenging, and not only in our own lives, but in working with, you know, with the men that come through us, or trying to help programs as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But what I was wondering, if maybe Jaime, you can talk a little bit about, you know, some of the lessons that you learned in growing up that helped you to be a good father. I mean, and when we talk about lessons, sometimes we think lessons are only come in good ways, right? They only come in happy, you know, positive ways. No, the lessons, you know, that we have learned, that now we can work with fathers because we've been through those lessons. And I wonder if you could just share a couple of the lessons that you've learned in the path that have helped you to become a good father, and then to be able to instruct other fathers that way.
Gracias, maestro. And yeah, and you're absolutely right. You know, sometimes the lessons come in a way that sometimes I became a master of evading my responsibilities. But if I think back, you know, I learned how to be, and you know, I stopped saying that, maestro, because I realized I'm not honoring my father, regardless. I honor my father. But you know, I learned how to be a father from all the things my father never did. And he was a wonderful guy, loving, caring, generous, you name it. And I could not figure out why he was in my life. But you know, sometimes I hear it. You know, over 30 plus years, I hear so many men say, "Well, I'm not a loving dad because they weren't loving to me." And I said, "No, that's the opposite. Those of us, because I identify myself, those of us who missed out on that relationship with the dad, that, you know, I used to say, you know, I wish my dad would throw a ball at me, not necessarily with me, but at me, but not even that. But I learned all the things that were missing. And I thought, when I'm a father, I'm going to do this. And one of the promises I made when I was maybe 15, or I don't know, more or less, I said, I will never do what my father did to me. I will never abandon my children. And so that was a very important lesson to me. And then when I realized I lost them, I lost my two daughters, and I was the only person responsible for that, I had to learn to take responsibility for my decisions. And from that point on, you know, and Maestro, I've shared with you what's a turning point. When they told me, Mr. Molina, you're looking at 12 years in prison, and this is what's going to happen. And at some point, I had to separate myself from my girlfriend and my two daughters, and say, well, if I love them, I need to let them go. And so that was a lesson there for me to learn. And then I made a commitment, as I mentioned in the previous question, that I will always be there for them because I lost them. And as men, some of us who are able to be in a confianza with other men or other people, I remember sharing with people, you know, the hardest thing was to think about not being their father. And that I had created that situation where they were actually gonna possibly have somebody else that they would call dad. And I had to learn that lesson and accept my role in my decision making. But at the same time, I said, well, regardless of that, I have to go on as a man. I have to go on as a father. I may give my palabra that I will always be there for them, regardless of what happened in my relationship. And you know, things happen because Creator is looking up for us. That somehow I was able to have this beautiful opportunity. And I would say October 28, 1992, 8:30 a.m., Creator gave me that opportunity for me to come home. And come home is a lot harder than we think, because some of us men, and I've done this work with many men who are in the wall or behind the wall or like about to reunite, and they don't know how to come home. And so that's another lesson. I thought, I know because I did it. So I share my hope with other men, because they're coming home and they don't know how to deal with the shame. They don't know how to deal with the guilt. They're unable to forgive themselves. They're unable to even have any sense of decision making at home. It takes time, and it takes trust, and it takes nurturing, and it takes the ability to humble ourselves, because I had to humble myself and just say, I don't know. and realize that some of the behavior I display, and my wife, you can ask her, she said, I was 33 years old, stuck in a 15-year-old body, and emotionally stuck, because I didn't know. I never grew up. I was high for 18 years, and so I came out of the system, and I didn't know how to do that, and I would struggle with like, well, this is that's how I think, and I had to learn that lesson, that accept and humble myself to say, I need somebody to guide me, and that's where Creator put us together, Maestro, and I'm just blessed to be part of this. Gracias.
You know, Jaime, thank you for sharing that, and I think there's some beautiful lessons. But one of the things that I just want people to realize as we're sharing is that we focus on something that's very traditional, and we share stories. We reflect what's going on with us. It's called el espejo, right? That many men, as you mentioned, Jaime, don't get a chance to share their story, but they also don't get the opportunity to listen to authentic stories of men that have struggled and have recovered that way, you know. And I think that's an important part of the work we do, you know. And I wonder, Mario, if you can, you know, maybe build on what Jaime said in terms of the lessons that you've learned, you know, in not only becoming a good father, but also working with fathers as well.
You know, I mentioned earlier about the needing to make the connection that in order to step up to be a good father, I had to learn first what it meant to be a man. Being a young dad and really growing up with my son or growing up with my child, I used to fall flat on my face a lot because there was a lot that I was very conscious enough to understand I was not ever going to do. Like Jaime said, my dad taught me everything not to do. But the struggle was not just being able to say, okay, well, I'm never doing those things. But I never understood how to actually step up as a healthy father. I never understood how to do the actual positive things that dads did because I really had no examples of that. The examples of men in my life, which I say this without judgment to them because they did what they had to offer. They did the best with what they were given, but they were very much those of being violent, of not being present, of having to survive at all costs. So when I wanted to step up and be a dad, the way I saw dads on TV, because, you know, a lot of us grew up seeing these images on television that just never translated to our homes. My dad wasn't the Leave It to Beaver dad. My dad wasn't the Wonder Years dad, you know. So I wanted to offer my son something I knew had to be different from what I was daily witnessing. But I really struggled in not just knowing what to do, but how to do it. Even something as simple as being able to play with my son. I was pretty good at being a hands-on young dad because I was always the little brother that would babysit the nieces and nephews. So taking care, diapers, all that, and even at a point where really I took a leadership role with my son because my son's mother and I broke up. And then I was a single dad with the help of my mom. That wasn't an issue. The issue was being able to just enjoy my time with him. You know, I would sit in my living room and he would be playing at my feet. And I would feel like there was this huge glass barrier wall between us. And my mind would say, get on the floor and play with them. But my heart would just feel so broken because I didn't want to harm him. I was so scared of passing on the teachings that my dad had given to me to him that I would really just stay back. And many years growing up like that with my son, unfortunately, I made a lot of mistakes, even as a single dad for many years. I made a lot of mistakes. I never gave up trying. I used to always apologize to him. And as a little kid, he probably was like, damn, why is my dad always saying I'm sorry? But it was for me, my way of just trying to own up to that it was a process that unfortunately he was going to grow up with a father that was going to keep having to learn, not from a base space, not from a point of zero, but from a deficit. just to play catch up. So I remember being little, like younger with my son, and growing up in LA, I would take the bus to the more rich parts of town because there would be parks where I would see dads playing with their kids.
Mm.
And I would put my son on the swing or in a slide, but I would really be paying attention to the men to see what is it that they're doing, because I didn't see that where I grew up. And I mean, I really think they must have thought, who's this trippy, weird looking kid just staring at us? Because I needed to see examples of what fatherhood was. And to me, when I really got connected with you, Maestro, and got connected to the Compadres Network, I really started, that was one of the things that I gravitated to, is the understanding that I needed a circle of support, a circle of reflection of people, and of, for me, men that were living the life I wanted to live. And not that every man in the circle was perfect, but they were men that were committed to the daily effort of being dads.
Mm.
They were men that were gonna try, even through sometimes some of their worst mistakes. I was reflecting on this the other day. We have learned how to look at our experiences and truly transform them into medicine. And one of the biggest things we can do with each other is see each other without shame. Because I think many times men really stay stuck and really isolate themselves because of the shame of their actions and the shame of their behaviors. And I was reflecting this to some fathers. Don't get me wrong. I'm still embarrassed about a lot of my decisions, but I'm not ashamed of them anymore. And to me, there's a difference with that. Embarrassed because I know I will never want to do some of those things ever again. But I'm not ashamed to talk about it. I'm not ashamed to share about it, because I want other people to understand that we all have the opportunity to really correct our mistakes, to really learn from our experiences, and to reflect to each other how we can together walk in that change, and really no longer have to be stuck in these places of darkness and isolation. And I reflected that in the work with the men I worked with. So I'll stop right there. But I mean, I could later get a little bit more into how we do that with the men that we've been blessed to be connected to.
Yeah. You know, both of you lifted up something really important, and even in the way that you talked about your fathers. And I think it's essential, because even though your fathers may have not been there in the way you needed, and maybe even did some harmful things, your whole transformation is not to shame them or blame them. That's their wounds coming out. And I think that's a real instructive thing for people working with men, because we live in a society, we live in the systems that right away want to blame men, want to make them perpetrators, want to really categorize them as negative, as all these negative things. And that's not helpful, and that's not healing. That's not engaging. We're not going to want to come back to a program or come back to that looks at us that way and talks about all the behavior that we've done wrong and makes us feel bad about those. Now, there's a difference between reflection and mirroring, and I think that what you mentioned, Mario, about recognizing the difference between acknowledging and what you've done and maybe being embarrassed by it but not being ashamed by it is a very critical thing. I think that's a real big differentiation, but also recognizing that it's a learning process, and I don't know which one of you mentioned even self-forgiveness, because I think when you can't really allow yourself to understand and then not hold yourself captive with what you've done, then you get frozen. And I really like your example, Maria, because I think Jaime kind of gave a similar example, that we become frozen. We don't know what to do, so we don't do anything. And sometimes, our wives or our partners or other people say, but why? He's not doing anything. Well, shoot, we don't know what to do. A veces no sabemos. And the biggest fear is we don't want to hurt our kids. We don't want to hurt our kids. And so sometimes we get frozen and not knowing what to do. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about, what it is that you think it's important for service providers to consider in working with fathers effectively. And I know the questions come up all the time, and we've been working for a lot of years with the same question. How do we recruit? How do we engage? And how do we keep men involved? And after all these years, it baffles me because, and the question that I have is, do programs really want fathers involved? Do they really want, you know, Chicano, Latino, Mexicano, African American? I mean, we're talking about Latino, but do they really want us involved? Because we want to include fathers, but, well, what's the but there? Do you really want us involved, right? And what do we have to do in order to be involved? So I wonder if you can share, I'll start with Mario this time, just in terms of service providers, what have you found that's important, you know, in working and in recruiting and engaging, you know, men in this path of being a better father?
Well, you know, one thing I experienced many years ago that I see still very true today, as we wanted to open up spaces for dads, we understood what the potential was of the space for them and what they could get out of it and the service. But unfortunately, society isn't set up for men in that way, where they're going to go and search for something that benefits them in the way of personal growth. The benefits that they look for are fulfilling immediate needs. Because as a provider, you're very limited with your time. You're very limited with what you can do. You're not taught to in any way fulfill life healthy goals. You're taught to just get by. So until we change this mindset in society of what men can offer themselves and offer their families and communities, we're going to have to keep going to what is the immediate need. So, and even if it's with the mindset of just to get something started. So what we understood in our communities is really what was sad is many of the men had to fulfill immediate needs due to having been formerly incarcerated or formerly arrested. And we started working with them to say, well, how can we support you in meeting these court needs? How can we support you in meeting these needs based on your probation or your parole? And for many of the men, that's how they initially came. But the thing was, even though they were coming because they were mandated, we also understand that with men, they might show up, but they're not going to participate unless they feel connected to what they're attending. And that had to do with how you treat them. Were you treating them as a parolee? Were you treating them as someone who was a mistake? Or were you welcoming them into the space so that they could reflect within themselves as they showed up, that we were valuing them just the way they were? To even say, I don't care what brought you here, I'm just thankful you showed up. How can I be of service to you? How can I be here to help you in your journey to really want to be to fulfill being the best that you want to be? And oftentimes people want to treat these services in a way where it's just, we're checking boxes, where we're hurry up and meet the contract. But if you're going to open up your space to these men, if you're welcoming, it's like your home. When you welcome people in, you got to welcome them in as they are, but with a whole heart and a whole spirit. And when the men would show up, they might have showed up with chips on their shoulder, but because how we treated them, how we welcomed them, how we gave them a space to really reflect, even share their mistakes without judgment, but hold high expectations to say, you deserve better, your children deserve better, your partners deserve better, and I'm going to walk with you to become better. Then the men would, I mean, it would come to a point in the beginning where maybe we had 5 dads a night. When we were closing out, before I left that organization, which we ran these groups for 10 years, we ended up, and I don't recommend this for anybody, but we used to have 50 fathers a night. Our group was 50 men a night, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Why? Because they would talk to each other and they say, no, that's the place to go. That's where you got to be. Now, one of the things that once you're able to demonstrate the connection and the success, unfortunately, we had some fathers that wanted to come and said, oh, but I've never been locked up. I've never been in trouble. That's not for me. And we used to come to these men and say, no, fatherhood is for everyone. This might be what got these brothers in the door, but they can benefit from what you have of life experience, and you could benefit from hearing their life experience. So fatherhood, we're all coming here as fathers. I've never been locked up, thank God, but I know what it's like to be the son left behind. I know what it's like to be the little brother that's waiting for his brother to come home. But I also know as a father, one thing I think it's important to note, these aren't experiences from the past. These are realities we deal with every day. And how do we reflect that to the men and to the people we're in circle with? Because we're always growing as students, we're always offering as teachers, and that never changes. That's the beautiful thing about this journey. There's no destination point to it. It's about the process of how we continue to grow within it.
Thank you, Mario. And that's, you know, the initiation of the National Compadres Network was we brought people together that were doing service, right? We were the professionals, we were the social workers, we were the therapists, we were the teachers. And at our first gathering, you know, we realized that we were all jacked up. So we're not talking about those people, we're talking about us together. We're talking about that all of us, you know, and I'm gonna say this to the service providers that are out there right now. If you haven't gone through your own journey, if you haven't gone through your own process, then you're not gonna be able to give the teachings, because you're gonna give them in a very, and that's why the system, the Western system does it that way, a top down. We're gonna teach you, I'm separated, I'm not connected, I'm not gonna be too objectively involved, I'm not gonna share a story. Why? Because that way you don't have to reach into your own self. And I think that's the transformation that needs to take place. That when we're working with our people, and you know, you got people that are immigrantes that have a lot of struggle and a lot of pain from that. You have people that are undocumented that struggle just in showing up for things, right? And so I think all of those things need to be taken into consideration when you're talking about developing programs and developing you know, services as well. Jaime, you want to offer some thoughts about that?
Well, I just want to echo what Mario said, because my thoughts are very much along the same lines. That one of the things that one of the hardest things for service providers is to not prejudge, because we were taught to have an opinion, or the system, even the what we hear, what we read, it's already kind of biased. And so when you welcome men and fathers into your space, well, do not prejudge. Do not fall into the stereotype, because, you know, I remember, and again, it comes from my own story, that when I made a commitment to change my life and to be home and to be a father and to be a husband and to be a son and to be a brother, you know, it's not as easy as it sounds, because you have even other men putting you down. Certainly the system and people expect you to fail. How can you go to a program and expect to heal when the system is already saying, well, when you come back, or when this happened? And so if we create a safe space, one of the biggest things that I shared with Maestro and Mario a little bit, that I used to work with men who were all in jail, medium security, prison offenders, AB 109. And so it wasn't like, oh, like, has anybody experienced? I mean, they all had made mistakes in their lives, but they were all looking to be acknowledged. One of the things I want to emphasize, that many of us men, one of the reasons we step out is because we're not acknowledged. We're actually judged before we even attempt. So some of us stop trying, because there's a concept that we're not going to get into, but it's called gatekeeping, because we expect men to fail, so women take over. And so we're like, well, give me a chance to try. Give me a chance to experience and make mistakes, but learn. And so sometimes our programs, without intention, they may create that. But if you want men to open up, as Mario said, you know, first they gotta be connected to what it takes to be a man. Mm-hmm. One of the things I always try to emphasize is give men opportunity to tell the story, because everyone on this, the panelists and everyone in this space right now, we all have a journey. We're all on a journey. And sometimes we don't get to share with other people, at what point in the journey am I at this point? And sometimes we don't give them the space or the opportunity, but, you know, giving opportunities to really get to know the man. Mm-hmm. And to create a trust. You know, I share that once you build trust, then you can begin. Mm. But if you don't work on welcoming and honoring and acknowledging and lifting up, and yes, acknowledging the baggage we all carry, but lifting up that we all have a purpose. Mm-hmm. And some men have never heard that. Yeah. Some men have never been given the opportunity to say, this is who I am. Yeah. And if just even the fact that you say, well, tell me your story. I say, Which one? I go, the one you tell yourself every day.
Mm.
And then they realize, like, well, why do you tell your story? Does it help you? No, I feel like. I said, well, change it, man. You can start today. We'll walk with you. We'll guide you. And then, as you said, if you really want to get engaged them, then you got to follow through. We have a lot of proof that, oh, the grant ran out and we stopped serving people. No, if you really want engagement, you got to let them know that you'll be there in the good times and the bad times. Yeah. Some men have been let down too many times.
You know, I think what both of you are saying is very significant, and even the narrative of how we address, men. You know, we call them compadres. Call them hermanos. We begin connecting and making an extended kinship. And once they finish their so-called service, they're still connected to our círculo. So it's ongoing. One of the biggest things that men have struggled with is the sense of detachment, meaning endings, leaving their country, seeing people die. So there's a lot of endings. And so it's really difficult to connect. But if your program is such that it's a continuous connection, what you want is to build the sense of compadres, sense of interconnected kinship. And I think, then we can begin exploring, so how do we change our lives? How can we modify our lives? And there's ways of working with men, making them accountable too. We're not talking about not making them accountable. We recognize that if you look at those concepts of el hombre noble, that violence is never okay. So it's never okay to be violent. It's never okay to disrespect women. And in fact, our mantra is the first lesson of true manhood is honoring women, honoring mujeres. So having these discussions of how do you balance out all of these things are real important. And then challenging, how do we change tradition? And I always tell the story that, when I grew up, I mean, every gathering, there was a lot of liquor there. There's always, a beer and kegs of beer, and even the baptismos and even the birthday parties. And at some point you have to question that. You have to say, hey, they say, hey, we're having a party for my little baby, and they're got all this. Why are you having alcohol there? Pues así es, es tradición. Well, but why? Why do we need alcohol? And then you can collectively, as men, say, how about if we all collectively agree that we're not going to have alcohol at children's parties or children's events? And that's going to shock your family, because even the mujeres say, wait a minute, But if that's what we want to do, because alcohol really, hurt us, and when alcohol was present, it wasn't good, then we have the choice. And so those are some of the opportunities you have too. When you're working with men, and as Mario said, there's a confianza there. There's a trust there. Now, let me just warn you, because as you become connected, they're going to say, pues te quiero invitar, come, and if your policy and your agent says, oh, no, you can't attend, you can't, well, then can't. Either we're connected or we're not connected. And I think that's what some of the policies and procedures in organizations inhibit us from really doing what is needed. I think we're gonna get ready to go to questions, but I want to give you an opportunity. Let's see if there's some questions here, and then at the end, I'm gonna ask both of you to get some consejos, some advice, not only to programs but to fathers. So, Dolca, are there some questions in the chat? And if not, I want to invite people to ask them some questions, to put in the question answer box, and we'll try and address them.
Thank you, everyone. What a wonderful conversation. I think it's so true that the storytelling is so powerful. The chat is on fire. We have so many positive comments, great people who are grateful because of the way that you are talking. That is so genuine, so engaging. Thank you so much for sharing your personal stories. This is beautiful. Now we have a few questions. The first one is for Victoria. Miss Victoria Guthrie say, can a woman teach a boy to be a good man? And we were talking earlier about this, Mr. Teo.
Yeah, we were talking. I think we all can give lessons, and definitely there's a lot of wonderful mothers that have raised children in a really good way. And so I want to acknowledge all the mothers that have raised wonderful children. But I tell this, and it's changing now, but there becomes a point, you know, I mean, now that they have more, you know, generic bathrooms, but before there was a point where a mother couldn't take her boy in the bathroom. At some point she had to say, mijo, go in, right? And if that boy doesn't know what to do, well, ¿qué hago, mom? I'll just go in there and go to the bathroom. Pero ¿cómo? You know, I mean, this boy, what you don't realize is, you know, if you're that boy, you go in like, what am I supposed to do? I mean, and I remember being in bathrooms with little boys that mothers have sent them in, and they don't know what to do. They go to the urinals and they don't know what to do. And I saw this boy put all his pants down, everything. Oh, he put them all down, and he was jumping up because it was too tall for him. ¿Verdad? Pobrecito, you know. And what does that do to a little boy that doesn't have guidance? And not that moms can't teach, not that moms can't guide, but there becomes a point where you're looking, how am I supposed to be in this world, right? And so mothers can do a good job. The second point that I'll make is that we worked with a lot of families in which mothers have experienced a lot of harm from the father, right? And so don't like the father, kicked him out because he was domestically violent, and it's totally justifiable. But then we see moms that look at their sons and says, you're just like your dad. Why, oh, you know what, if you don't do your, I mean, and what ends up happening is the coraje that the moms have, the resentimiento, then gets transferred, whether it's conscious or unconscious. Now, the same thing when we have women that are working with men, and we get the question, can women work effectively with men? As long as you are not angry at us, as long as you really can honor us and embrace us without the shame and the blame. Yeah, you can. But at some point we need, as you know, both Mario and Jaime have said, we need to see other people that look like us, and to be examples for what we can do. Mario or Jaime, you got the.
Sure.
No, I think you did a good job of offering, and I think it's important to acknowledge that this is honestly a question that I've learned now that lives really within that binary of men and women, and that there's a reality that goes a little bit stretched out beyond that to also include our gender non-conforming, our non-binary, our transgender relatives también. But it is important that I believe for us that if we fall within that binary and that's who we are, to have examples, healthy examples of what that's supposed to look like, and examples that are also fluid with it, to understand that it's not just about how we were taught, but how we're going to grow and how we're going to expand on the teachings. Yes, my mother was solid. My mother to this day is one of my queens, because I'm married, so I have two. But I also feel that my mom did her best in being mom. But the fact that I didn't have dad, and I didn't have a healthy dad or a healthy example of a man, it really always made me feel less than. And it wasn't until I surrounded myself with healthy men that I was able to understand what was missing, and also what I could in turn around and offer to my son as well. I don't know if Jaime wants to add.
Well, I always want to acknowledge that, I'm sure other men here, that I was raised by my mom. My mom threw my dad out, and he because, you know, well, I'm not gonna get into that, but my mom helped raise 7 of us, and she did 300%, and women moms do 300%. But you know, there are things that not necessarily that they need another father in the home, but we need role models. We need somebody to follow. We need, at some point, and in some ways, in some circumstances, as Maestro was pointing out, that there are situations where it may be more appropriate to have a male presence, and so in our teachings we honor both mom and dad, and so we don't want to say, oh, you know, moms can do or shouldn't do 100%. You know, unfortunately, some moms have to do that. There's no option. But I also want to acknowledge that the father figure, the male presence, the male role model, the male leadership is key as well.
Yeah, you know, what I want to add to that is that in our traditional culture, we had extended kinship. So we had tios and tias, we have other people. And even if the dad was gone, then some tio or somebody had to stand up, right? Unfortunately, in our Western programming, we look at only the nuclear family and we say, well, if the father's not there, I guess, no, who's gonna step up? So many of us in our programming, we have mothers that come to, and we become the tios. We become the ones that help guide. In our Joven Nobel program, we get a lot of young men that their dads are not present, their dads have been deported, their dads have died, their dads are locked up. And so we must, in our process, step up to be the ejemplo. We don't step in the role of fathers. And even those fathers that are wounded or not present, one of the real important things is not to demonize the father or make him look bad, because this kid, regardless of what the dad has done, still longs to have a relationship with his father. And the girls as well, and working with the same thing. They long to have a relationship with their dad. So part of it is, how do we help them develop a relationship that is realistic, but maybe in the future can transform? Because sometimes it's not until much later. So I think women play a very important role. Many times women are the gatekeepers. And unfortunately, sometimes women either can encourage or stand in the way also of fathers being involved in the lives of their children. And we understand the safety issue and all of that. We're concerned about that too. But barring that, then yeah, we need to work together. We need to work together for the good of the children.
Maestro, if I could, there was
Yes.
one part I forgot to just emphasize a little bit, because I did mention our relatives that are fall within the LGBTQ community, or the gender non-conforming, non-binary, and transgender. As my child has been transitioning, I've learned that he now looks at me for direction in certain things that before weren't really topics between him and I. And I'm realizing at one point I was stuck, because in my mind I thought, okay, he's 17 years old. What am I going to teach him it means to be a male? What am I going to teach him it means to be a man? And there was these thoughts in my head that right away honestly went to like these thoughts that sometimes come from what we think have to be, this is what a man is. And I've learned that with my son, I get to redefine masculinity with him. I get to redefine manhood with him in a way that really, he's teaching me as much as I feel I'm teaching him. And the fact that we lead with love in this sense really helps him understand that as he's making this transition, which is very scary for a person. It's very scary to know your identity and finally start coming to it. I really question myself sometimes before I offer advice to him, because there's thoughts that make me think, well, that's not a boy or that's not a man thing. But I have to really reevaluate that in my mind first to think about, this direction he's asking for. How is it going to benefit him? How is it going to represent what's healthy for him? How is it going to support me as a person too now, as a father learning to grow up with a transgender masculine boy, and really loving him, leading with the love I have for him above anything else, which really makes me realize that some of the stuff I thought was so important doesn't even matter. What matters is him feeling very secure in his own sacredness. Mm-hmm. So I say that to all of us, because even though we're speaking in what's rooted us, the whole point of culture and tradition and teachings is to also let them organically grow and manifest for the next generation. And I feel this is a lot of what's happening right now.
So if I could just, I want to just kind of reflect on what just went on right here. Because when we work with men, this is the process that goes on. We allow dialogue, we allow questioning, we struggling with this, because the reality is our children challenge us, and they don't come and grow up in the packages in the way that we think. They challenge us every day. And so where do men go without feeling inadequate, that they can say, man, I don't know what to do, and without, taking too much time you know, we have been in Círculo discussing many of these things, you know, that Mario talks about. And in him going through this journey, it's enlightened all of us. So in him, you know, sharing all of this, we other men then begin to reflect on how are we dealing with our children? What prejudgment are we having? In him sharing that, right, it opens up a whole other discussion centered around how did we embrace and acknowledge and love our children the way they are, which is the rudimentary aspect of sacred fatherhood, right?
Thank you. I truly appreciate Mr. Mario and Tejo and Jaime, Mr. Jaime. This is beautiful, Mr. Mario, because I think many parents are listening this session and will be listening this session, and probably they have the same struggle. How I support my child who is from the LGBTQ or non-binary. So, and you are providing your personal experience, and I love that you have to redefine the way that you were thinking. Thank you so much for sharing that. We appreciate. Um, we have the next question is for Cristo Alfaro, Mr. Cristo Alfaro, and the question is kind of similar to the one that I asked before. He said, can a mother play the role of a father? Growing up with my mother will say that she was my mother and father, but I always felt that I need an actual man to share knowledge of what it is to be a man.
Well, again, I think this is, you know, it's a complex issue because I think we all can offer something to our children. I think the problem is in Western society, you think of it as an individualistic thing. And this is, again, Western society thing, mother. You know, I had my mother, but I also had tias, right? And my mother taught me some teachings that were good, but my tias also taught me some things that were good too. So, but here comes the situation where I have a daughter, ¿verdad? And I have a daughter and she's growing up, and so in my house, because of the work that I do, we're very open. We talk about, you know, sexuality, we talk about the body, we talk about development, about menstruation, about todo. So everything is out there. Pero aquí llega mi hija, and I'm at work, and her mother calls me one day and says, I just wanted to let you know that Renee started her period today. Oh, okay, pues está bien, yeah. Okay, no problem. And she's, so why'd you call? Well, I just want you to know because, you know, she's feeling a sort of way. And I'm thinking, okay, what do I do as a dad? Because I never experienced that before. I don't know what to do. What do I do with a daughter, you know? And even though I teach sexuality, I teach reproductive health, I know all this intellectually, I never experienced. So I'm thinking, well, I don't want her to feel bad. I want her to feel ashamed. So on the way home, I stop and get some flowers. Okay, because it's supposed to be a wonderful time, and I stop and I get flowers and I go home, and so I get home and I go in her room and she's doing her homework, and I said, Mija, I brought you some flowers, congratulations. And she looks at me like I'm crazy. Like, Dad, what are you talking about? Well, your mom said that you started, you know, your period and you're a young woman now. And she says, Dad, just leave them there, okay? I'm doing my homework. You know, it hurts, okay? Now just, can I have my privacy? And I'm saying, dang, man, I thought I was doing something good, right? And I go and her mom says, you know what? That's wonderful. You brought her flowers, but you don't understand and you'll never understand, right? You won't, I mean, it's good that you're sensitive, but you don't get it, and you won't get it. You know, and it doesn't mean that I'm inadequate. It just meant that my daughter needed mujeres that have been through that journey, right? And not that mothers can't do the job, but so I'm saying if you have men in your life that can add to your instruction, the better. It doesn't have to be, can a mother do it by themselves? This society makes you believe that you have to do it by yourself. Extended kinship is much better all the time. You just have to pick people that give good teachings. And it's not just enough, just pick a man, no. Okay, que son un ejemplo, un buen ejemplo, right? Somebody that really knows that. And that's what we try and create in our programming and when we do teachings and stuff like that. I don't know, Jaime, if you want to add, or Mario.
I wanted to share just kind of maybe the opposite. as Maestro knows, I spend all my money on women. And the reason I do that is because I have four daughters. Me and my wife have four daughters, and my wife and my mother-in-law, and she lived with me for 25 years. And so I had to also adapt as a male, being raised in chaos and learning to be a good father and being a present father, not just a title dad, but a involucrado. I was involved in my children's life. And so I guess what I want to share that the key is having interdependent, interconnectedness with your familia, as a male, as a mother, as a father, and that's I thought, well, that's what I'll try to do, because as Maestro was saying, I have four girls, and I had to learn to build this relationship with them, because we can talk about anything and everything, because I'm in the role, and I raised my daughters. Four quinceañeras, two weddings, and I'm still healing from it, but it's okay, right? Because I had the privilege and the honor and the beautiful gift of being able to be in their life. So I've learned to do that, and I try to model this for other men, because they see me, like we as men don't talk about it, but we see. And so I try to model, and as Maestro was adding or kind of sharing that, it's really about how you show up, how you are present in their lives as a mother. Sometimes I say that for my mother because she had no choice. And I realized my mom was not the easiest person to live with, but that's another story, right? But the point is that having interdependent relationships. Last week, and I'm not gonna get into specifics, but last week I went and picked up my daughter's contraceptive medication, and they thought they were looking at me. They were laughing. They were just smirking a little bit and said, "Wow, you doing that for your daughter?" Yeah. And there's a whole reasoning, a medical reasoning for that, not necessarily that I'm okay with something, but it's about that, and saying, I know who I am, and I know that I'm doing something good, and I am, as a father, I am with them. And the last point I want to make is that we instituted, which is central to the work that we do, is what we call circle. We do círculo. And so building on how to be in that interdependent relationship with our daughters or sons and family is to create spaces where people can connect. We have Father's Day, we did Círculo. We have Mother's Day, we have Círculo. We have birthday parties, we have Círculo. And so we get to really embrace each other and build that confidence that comes with that. And so it's central to men having, if men have a place where they can, as Maestro was saying, where they can really feel like I'm being heard. People are not judging me. I can come in and say, this is what I'm struggling with. I can only imagine, but I know Mario is such a grounded individual that with all the challenges, he's still carrying on, and we have a lot to learn from Mario as he goes through that journey.
Mhm.
Gracias, Maestro.
Thank you. And you are not the only one who is grateful. Look at this. We have so many comments in the chat. Like, for example, Yvonne said, you are all amazing men. Thank you so much for your stories and experiences. Very great presentation. So we have really good people who are very grateful for these sessions. Now we have time for the last question. And I have this question here in the chat to say, that is asking, why do you think we have alcohol in all the children parties? From where this tradition come from?
Well, we live in a society that promotes alcohol, that the alcohol industry is capitalism. It's money, and it's promoted especially in communities of color. If you think about it. Why is it in rich communities there's an ordinance that say you can only have a liquor store every 3 miles? In the barrio, you can have a liquor store every corner. Now, why is the ordinance like that? Why do they promote? Why are, for Cinco de Mayo 16, you get all Coors, all these companies that are promoting? Why is that happening? So, there's something systemically that really has promoted this, the whole sense of alcohol, and we can talk about drugs and all of that in the very same way. But the other thing, the secondary thing is, and we've seen it in COVID, the tremendous amount of mental health issues and health issues in communities, and there's not supports there available that are culturally appropriate, that people trust. Where can men go, that are having these problems without getting violated by their probation officer, being incarcerated, and really share what's going on with them? So instead of that, you're not knowing what to do, you drink, and by the way, alcohol is not just an issue in Latino communities. It's an issue across the board, but we get stigmatized with it. There's a much alcohol abuse and substance abuse in mainstream society. The opiate crisis is major in white communities, but they don't stereotype and say white people do this. So we need to also begin to reframe how we look at things. But the reason why that happens is, a veces costumbre, tradición, and those are the things that we're talking about. We need to even challenge some of the traditions that have been customary in order to bring them more in line with healthy relationships. Mario, you have a comment related to that, or?
Yes, I would add that one of the things we've learned from our elders, one of the things we've learned as we connect with traditions is, unfortunately, also we've been taught to focus more on the celebration than the ceremony. These opportunities of honoring life, these opportunities of, say, a baptism, communion, or graduation, it's definitely good to celebrate, but traditionally before there was a connection with ceremony and process and responsibility and a celebration that looked at lifting up life. But I also feel that because our communities are so constantly, well, one, either never allowed space to just relax, and two, not taught how to gather without fear of bronca. Like, I mean, I understood why there was always drinking in my house, because everybody was scared. Because sometimes you were more scared of your tío fighting your other tío than you were about anything else, because there was always some kind of problem happening, and people weren't taught how to gather in a way of dealing with it and honoring the relationships. So that's why there was a lot of self-medication, which is what the alcohol does, right? It helps us to self-medicate. But I also feel we've been taught to be so disconnected that we forgot the intent for why we were gathering to begin with, which I think you could have as much fun and celebration in honoring the ceremonies of the beautiful accomplishments, the connections that are being made for the children to a sense of spirit. But when we don't lift that up and prioritize it, again, the celebration controls everything. And that's why you have people that are doing rites of passages like quinceañeras, and they're spending so much money and going in debt to show off something that they don't even have, where they forgot that the point of the quinceañera was to really lift up this young woman from being a child to a young woman and her new role in society. So I think those are just some of the things that are important to acknowledge about that kind of life. But I also want to reemphasize what Maestro said. If we don't have people stepping up to say that's not necessary, then unfortunately the cycle is going to continue. I myself, I think I'm going on 18 years clean and sober, because I made a decision to no longer want to incorporate that in my life. And I don't brag it to the world, but I think it's important to talk about it with men to show them there's examples of lives that are very happy and that don't need to self-medicate in that way. But if we don't give those examples, how do we know it's even a possibility?
Thank you so much. I think with this, we're going to conclude the Q&A questions. We thank you all the attendees for the questions that you posted in the Q&A. I'm sorry we were not able to answer all of them. We're gonna send these to the presenters to answer those questions via email. So now we have some resources that are available for you in the next slide, some books that you can find that are very useful for the topics that we are discussing today. This is the contact information for our moderator. So we want to thank you again to all of you for especially to you, Mr. Theo and Mr. Jaime and Mr. Mario, for the invaluable work that you do for our communities and to support the Hispanic and Latino males, Chicano males also. Thank you so much. Over here, you see our contact information. Please reach out for more to learn more about our projects and to request training and technical assistance. Everything is free, so feel free to reach out to us. Here is the information about our wonderful 2021 National Latino Behavioral Health Conference, envisioning Latino behavioral health equity in the next decade. September 16 to the 17th, we are preparing around 18 workshops, 3 keynote speakers, exhibit rooms, award programs. And today at midnight, you have until midnight today to submit your proposal. So visit the website, our conference website, to learn more. And here is, please, everyone, we will ask you again to help us to complete the evaluation. Remember that your opinion is important to us. Once again, thank you for joining us during our event titled Sacred Fatherhood. Thank you so much to all the panelists and the moderator. Thank you, the National Compadre Network, for all the wisdom that you share with us today. Have a wonderful afternoon. Muchísimas gracias, familia, donde quiera que estén. Gracias por apoyarnos siempre.